So everyone, without further ado, welcome to Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy down here, Vlad. We have made it to episode 41 of the Emerging Technologies in Manufacturing theme, and we have a very special guest to finish us out on this theme, Bob Meads of IQ Agent. So, Bob, we'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks a lot, David. I'm really excited as we talked last week about being here and meeting you guys and Vlad. So I'm excited.
No, perfect. So, but before as everyone knows, we'll have Bob talk about, what he does, and specifically in the augmented reality and virtual reality space. But as I was reminiscing with Bob, I was joking about the first time Bob and I met. So this was probably 5 years ago, and we were at a small brewery at a co-branded Siemens event out in Reno, Nevada, and Bob had flown out from Atlanta. I think I had come in from Buffalo, and we had never met before. And here was the man with the most amazing technology I had ever seen. So he was the first person I had ever met who had an iPad Pro. And he liked to joke that he had to convince his wife that it was an appropriate business expense to get an iPad Pro. But so he had like the first iPad Pro, and then he comes in and he's talking about augmented reality and virtual reality. And I'm thinking to myself, I think that this is still a few years away, but then something amazing happened. Then he pulled out the Microsoft HoloLens, and for some reason, as most everyone at the bar was already drinking, allowed us all to put it on and experience IQ Agent that we'll talk about in real life. And it was amazing when you put it on, but it was also the best bar trick in the world because it was one at a time, and everyone who put it on looked like complete idiots trying to tell it to do something. And I know I had to repeat the request 5 times in a row, and I'm trying to point and poke at it. Needless to say, it is indelibly etched in my memory, and so is Bob. And that was kind of very much my first hands-on steps of, hey, this is actually going to be something, and it may take a little while, but augmented reality is going to change the face of manufacturing. So yeah, welcome, Bob. Can you give everyone a little bit more of a background of how you've gotten here and how you got into augmented reality, please?
Absolutely. And Dave, thank you for that. I remember that day and night very well. We had people from the automotive industry and manufacturing and controls engineers. And it's one thing to talk about augmented reality, but to see it in the context, especially of the HoloLens, because it's immersive, is really what gets people excited. But my background is kind of varied. I was Navy submarines for about 7 years. I was an electronics technician. I got out. I went to work in a production plant here in Georgia at NEC Technologies. I was a production engineer. We made computer monitors. We made CD-ROM drives, which were brand new back in the 90s. And then I went to work for Siemens. And I was very interested in driver development and integrating hardware and software back then. And I wanted to work with drivers and things like that. So I got to work with their SCADA product, WinCC, which I fell in love with, and I still work with WinCC, even to this day. And Siemens is a great friend to me, as well as customer. And after I left Siemens, I started a company, and it was really around WinCC and controls consulting. I met my business partner, Pat Meir, who I brought on, and he and I did some software development together. But things kind of changed. I saw development for new technologies kind of picking up. And when the iPad 2 came out, because the iPad 1 didn't even have a camera, but when the iPad 2 came out back in 2011, Pat and I were looking at the iPad 2, and we were trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get this on the plant floor, and what are we going to do with it? And we were batting around ideas, but it occurred to me that every idea we had was already out there. It was just on a computer. Hey, let's make a SCADA client. Well, there's many SCADA clients. Okay, so now you can walk around. I can do that with a laptop, and let's make a database interface, and let's do whatever. And so, and I like to joke, and it's partly true, that I came up with the idea for IQ Agent one Saturday morning when I was doing, what most Georgia guys do on Saturday morning. I was cleaning my shotgun and watching The Matrix. And it occurred to me that I wanted to look through this iPad device at the plant. And when it passed a piece of equipment, it would pop up relevant information about that equipment. And, first thing came to my mind was PLC information. But then later, it was drawings and schematics and stuff like that. And so that's where the concept that was born. And this is 2011. So immediately hired a developer. We started the patent process, which we do have a patent. And we came up with a lot of different technologies about how to do just that. And I looked at object recognition and dead reckoning and things like that. But we came up with the idea of a QR code because it's deterministic. It doesn't cost anything. And that's kind of how it took off. And then once we did the iPad, then later, we had demand for Android. And then, of course, the Hololens came along. The RealWear HMT head-mounted tablet, also came along. But that's kind of where it was born. And so, our first customer was in 2012. So we'll be 10 years old in just a month or two. But that's kind of how it all started.
That's a very interesting introduction, Bob. I think, I have several questions that I would like you to expand on, but a very interesting, I guess, fact based on your background, because I think we've had several people that went through the Navy as, technicians on a sub. So I'm thinking that has been a very, interesting experience in itself. So I know it's Sean Terrell, and I believe we had a few others, Dave. I don't know if you remember the names, but it seems like a very, I guess, interesting path. And I would assume that it has probably led to many experiences that you can draw from in terms of, work ethic and just general, I would say, drive to work on some of these technological advancements. But yeah, go aaid. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've actually met a lot of controls engineers that are ex-submariners.
Mm-hmm.
We're proud of our Dolphins, which is the warfare pen that you work very, very, very difficult to earn while you're in the Navy. There are several people at Siemens. There was a gentleman named Jonathan Forrester that some of my Siemens friends will remember, who was exceptionally brilliant. But we were trained very hard. It's a very rigorous environment.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on inertial navigation systems, on the boomers out of Charleston. And just about everything we did was classified. I used to joke, when I got married, when I was on the boats, and I came home one day, and my wife says, "How was your day?" And I said, "That's classified." And then I slept out in the yard that night. So, but I do believe it has something to do with it, because it's a very rigorous environment. You're surrounded by technology. You lend your life, and you depend on technology, because if something goes wrong down below the waves, then you're kind of on your own. So it's a brotherhood. But I do believe that it drives people to really excel and technical and things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I would say that technology is in many ways led by a lot of the military applications, and also, I guess, AR, VR, we could say that gaming leads some of that technology as well. But it would be also, I guess, interesting to get your perspective on that as we continue the discussion. But, going back to the starting point of where you decided to found the company and found your first engineer, what were your thoughts at the time, right? So this is 2011, you said, and before you got your first customer in 2012, were there any maybe doubts? Was there a certainty of what you were going to deliver? What was, I would say, if you could paint us a picture of what was playing in your head as you were diving into this technology that was at the time, I would say, unproven, what were you imagining or thinking at the time?
Well, I never really had doubts that it would be accepted. And even back then, augmented reality was something very, very, very new. And we weren't really thinking augmented reality. We were thinking about applications that would help in the manufacturing. And one of the things that, as I thought about this and I worked, very hard on this technology, was the litmus test of this application would not be, "Hey, look, this is an augmented reality app." It was, "Wow, this makes my job a lot easier. This is, totally, I just lost the word, but it helps me do my job. And then later it's, oh, okay, that was augmented reality. And we were, what we really wanted to do was change the paradigm of how people consume data on the plant floor, because you're tied to an HMI panel, or you're tied to a control room screen, or you're tied to whatever. We wanted to break that tie. And, we felt like mobile applications were going to do that. And this was at a time where you didn't use your cell phone on the plant floor, because they would not allow you to do that, or they were, very strict about it, especially Android phones, because there's a perception that they're less secure than iOS. But we felt like there would be adoption, because we saw that adoption for new technology was being accepted much faster and at an accelerating pace than before. Because when I first got into Siemens, Windows 95 was out, and Wonderware was born on Windows 95. And then, Windows NT, which is supposed to be the kind of industrialized version of Windows, was starting to kind of gain acceptance and things like that. So we felt like it was going to be accepted. And I felt like it was a matter of time. And I had this idea of this mobile workforce. And my very first customer, which was a global pharmaceutical company, they were doing things like, they bought like 50 iPads, and then they charged their people to go out and say, okay, how do we use these on the plant floor? And so you had these companies that had these, what they call mobility initiatives. Mobility meaning I can walk around with this mobile device. So I knew that it was going to take off, and I knew that it was going to be accepted on the plant floor. And we wanted to deliver the application that was different than other applications. We didn't want an app that you could also have on a PC. The litmus test for IQ Agent was it was worthless if you were on a PC, because its whole innate productivity and worth came from the fact that it's on a mobile device, and I can make your planner a target-rich environment or a data-rich environment just by pointing my mobile device at a piece of equipment and instantly getting all the access. And that decentralizes how you get data, and it starts to kind of move away from the fixed HMI panel and things like that.
And to paint maybe a better picture for the listeners, right? So I've been to several trade shows where there have been demonstrations of, the Rockwell solutions that you would essentially use either like augmented reality goggles or like an iPad, like you've mentioned, and kind of point it at a device. So I believe that the use case in that scenario was like a pump that you could point your iPad on, and then it would provide you certain, like data points. So it would say like, what's the temperature it's running at? What's the current like volume it's pushing through? But could you maybe explain to us what could be some other use cases for those who haven't, been to a demo? What would you practically be able to do with, let's say, an iPad on the manufacturing floor when it comes to augmented reality?
Well, we work on what you call the point of interest concept. Think of Google Maps for the plant floor. So on Google, you say, hey, show me hotels near me, and it shows you hotels. What we do is we have the point of interest concept. And so in our configuration software, you create a point of interest for anything, a piece of equipment or a part of a piece of equipment or a warehouse shelf or whatever. And then you just drag in information. You can drag in OPC UA data points or DA data points or SQL queries. You can drag in, documents, schematics, videos, training material. And we also have the ability to do workflow and forms. And so you associate all that with the point of interest, print the QR code and put it where you want it. And so then from the iPad app or the HoloLens or whatever, you point it, it finds that QR code, and then we pull up all the information that you have for that piece of equipment. And it can be anything. And the beauty of it is, we didn't want to be tied only to augmented reality. So, we tell people one of the biggest things about augmented reality pilots is they have a certain amount of money, and it's, okay, we're going to spend, X $1,000s on these goggles, and we're going to spend all this, and they're going to end up with an AR demo that works with one person at a time on one piece of equipment, and then they're going to try to get ROI out of it. With us, you can do that. You can buy your HoloLens, you can buy your RealWear, but it'll also work on an iPhone 4. It'll also work on an iPad or an Android phone. So you're going to get, your ROI out of it. But the whole thing is you tie everything back to, your QR code, which you can pull it up on a menu. But the beauty of it is I'm not publishing anything. It is not a custom application. It's off the shelf. So if you go put a few data points in a document, and then somebody says, "Hey, we just got the new schematics for that," or "We just did a training video," you open up the software, drag in the video. Now the next time somebody scans it, boom, the video's there. So it's a live system. And so you can put any electronic content there that you want, and you're limited to 2.14 billion QR codes. After that, I guess you're kind of out of luck. But I think the most that a plant that we've got has been about 9,000. So they had plenty to spare for their equipment. Does that make sense, Vlad?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting application. I personally can only see this increasing in popularity, especially again with everyone trying to get this just-in-time information to their
Yeah.
workers. And it could be, I personally, I've worked quite a bit in engineering and maintenance, and I could see how if you're troubleshooting something on the line and then you have to go back to the shop just to get a manual, it's going to save you a ton of time.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely like many different cases for different departments. I think the use cases are going to be very different, right? For someone who works more in operations and needs to, for example, punch in a new recipe into your SCADA system that may not have everything saved. It's a recipe that's produced by your SAP, for example, then displaying that recipe on the either iPad or HoloLens, like you mentioned, could be of extreme value to the operator that's currently working
Right.
on that
Right.
system.
Well, that was another kind of gist of what we wanted. We also, wanted IQ Agent to be useful to the different roles out on the plant floor. So you've got your production workers, you got production supervisors, you got your engineers, production engineers, maintenance engineers, you got your supervisors. And so we created use cases for all of those. So for your engineer, think about doing a light test. You got your PLC program. You got to have two people. You got one person, maybe plugged into the PLC, and you got somebody out where the I/O is, and hey, did the light come on? Did the light come off? But with IQ Agent, you can have those points wherever you're at, so you can kind of be around and see that information. But we can, for your production supervisors, they can see, where things are up or down. If you've got an engineer at home, they can pull up the points of interest at home. And for the executives, for your C-suite, one of the cool things is they can pull up the key performance indicators on their phone live at any time. Just by, you don't have to scan the QR code. There's a menu that you can pull up. But if you want to know what your base production is and what your production rate, your count is, even if you're, away at lunch or at home, you can get that information. So we don't compete with SCADA, because that's another thing I know from years and years of being in SCADA support and sales is if you compete with SCADA, you're not going to do that. So we extend, exactly like you said, the SCADA that they have. We can extend those data points that they're using. If they're web-based, we can, show information from the SCADA system without kind of stepping on SCADA's toes. So we want to have a use case for virtually anyone in the plant, because that's going to help the ROI. Because at the end of the day, the ROI is what is going to make or break this or any product is the same to the plant floor, because they don't buy glam, they don't buy fluff. They'll look at it and go, wow, that's really cool, and I can do like Dave said and look around and see stuff. But if it doesn't have ROI and if it doesn't solve a real problem, it's not going to sell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Dave, did you want to?
Yeah, no. So I was going to say, I think Bob's last comments bring up a good point. I've said, for at least most of this year and probably longer, that for me, the most interesting kind of emerging next set of technologies is going to be in this AR, VR technology on the plant floor level. And I've also said that, this is the sort of technology, next generation technology you can implement tomorrow for all of the reasons that Bob has said, is that it's a relatively low cost. You can start with nearly anything that you use. You can go ahead and tag a machine line. And as James mentioned in the comments, he's taken, PDF manuals and put them on HMIs. I think many of us have, taken those and connected them to HMIs or connected them into the SCADA system. But now, as opposed to having to go into the SCADA system, you can go ahead and empower your engineers, your maintenance staff to go ahead and scan it and immediately have access to the manuals, immediately have access to potentially live data, as opposed to the alternative of walking and spending half an hour going to dig out the manuals from somewhere, or going to get to a computer and then going to find the SCADA system and figure out where they can log in. It's something that you can immediately do. And I think that for me, it's one of the most exciting emerging technologies of how can we leverage the normal technology that we use in everyday day-to-day life at our jobs. I kind of think that it's humorous that we build cars and we build airplanes and we make all of the food that everyone has to eat in order to survive, but the operators go from 2021, where they're on Facebook up until 3 minutes before they get into the plant floor, to like 1997, where let's hope that the mouse works. And if it doesn't work, we like have to take it out and pull the roller ball out and blow into it and put the ball back in. Like for me, it's very funny that, so much of the technology that we use and everyone has grown up on or grown accustomed to using just like ends when we walk into the plant floor. And this amazing consumer technology, like the iPad, as Bob described, are so difficult to go ahead and leverage within the plant floor itself.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and that's a great point. And I do see that. I do see more adoption, but I still see a lot of plants that are, filling out, paper forms and doing check boxes, and then they go hand it to somebody, and they got a stack of these on their desk, and they're entering into into Excel, and then somebody else is sucking this into a database. And one of the things that, when I talk to people about IQ Agent, is that it is a digitalization platform for a very low cost. We can do the first step toward getting you to using the mobile devices, because we can force you to digitize those documents and organize them. And it's funny because I've had discussions, with actually a pretty big brewing company, that they loved the product. They said, well, we don't have time to organize our documents. And I said, guys, you don't have time to not organize your documents, because if you can't find them, then the guy that's got to do the PM, or the guy that's got to do the troubleshooting, or the guy that's got to go find the schematics to order a part, when you really need it, they're not going to be able to find it. But one of the big things, though, cybersecurity comes into this. Most of the big plants that want to use iPads and mobile devices in general, they want these things to be managed. So you got mobile device management, and this adds another layer of complexity. And a lot of companies look at this and they look at it as this, all right, this is this gigantic task, and they don't even want to start. And I think it prevents some of these companies from really taking advantage of mobile technology and AR and things like this, because, it can look like quite a daunting task.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've had similar experiences in many manufacturing sites as you've described, Bob. I want to follow up on on a couple of technologies that we've mentioned, which are the headsets, because as you've alluded to, you've started in 2011, so all the hardware was not necessarily the same as it is today. So I wanted maybe to get your opinion on what's the current landscape. If you're going into a manufacturing site, what kind of different devices would you see paired with augmented reality? Are there any advantages or drawbacks to like either one?
Well, yeah, there are. And it really depends on the use case. Phones and tablets are great, and most people use these. And that's the big advantage, is that, they have these, they're used, and a lot of companies will buy iPads or buy, tablets, and they're easily managed and things like that. But the downside is you got to use at least one of your hands, to really view the data. And, there's one vendor out there that has an augmented reality version, but it only works on the tablet, and you have to set the tablet down. And that's your use case, which doesn't, kind of doesn't make sense for me. Augmented reality, really to really realize its full potential, really needs to be hands-free. The HoloLens 1 was great. We embraced it when it came out, but that's not really something you're going to have someone working 8 hours in. And even Microsoft said that. It wasn't fully safety rated. It was big. The battery life, wasn't great when you're, kind of running these things. HoloLens 2 is better. I think that the big advantage right now goes to RealWear, head-mounted tablet one. When I first saw them, I have to be honest with you, I wasn't impressed. It was a monocle, and I was thinking, okay, well, I don't know about that. But when I first kind of played around with it, and the big thing is you got to put it on a bump cap, or you got to put it on a hardware hat, because that makes it stable. If you just slap it on your head and you're moving your head and it's kind of jangling around, it's kind of hard to get situated. But once you get used to it and it kind of sits below your eye, then it's good because you're hands-free and you can go around. And with IQ Agent, you can pull up information and you can do things. And there's quite a few of my customers are using at least a couple head-mounted tablets. There's been a lot of headgear that hasn't made it out, and they were kind of targeted toward manufacturing. But the thing about manufacturing is you got to pay attention to what they're doing. If you've got a physical tether, that's an okie dokie for most manufacturing plants, because you can't have a wedding ring, you can't have a bracelet, you can't have a necklace. And if you do, I don't care if it's under your clothes or if it's a breakaway, it's just not going to happen. So the wearables that don't have that are going to have the advantage. I think, the HMT1 is probably the most practical. Vuzix has got some nice stuff out there, but it is tethered. Some are, wirelessly tethered back to, mobile device. The HoloLens 2 is not, and it is a very nice unit, but the suites that come with the software and everything like that, it's kind of hard to buy like 10 or 15 or 5 dozen of those things, because it's a pretty big thing. And there's a lot of development that goes into that. So mostly what I've been seeing in America, it's iPads and HMT ones, and then a smattering of kind of the others, and then the labs will have the HoloLens. In Europe, it is Android devices. I've got some resellers over in Europe, and they've been kind of beating on me to get an Android tablet version, which is kind of tough because I don't have pressure here in the U.S. for that. I have pressure, more for the, for the tablet based. But there's a lot of vendors coming online. You've got Third Eye, and you've got, there's a lot of medical devices that are coming out, and people are seeing that augmented reality for manufacturers is a lot better bet than Pokemon Go in games, which are very cool, and you've got wide acceptance. But manufacturing, those people have money, and those people will spend it once you get to it. So I think over the next year and 18 months, there's going to be even more head-mounted stuff coming out. I think RealWear has actually come out. I don't know if it's new hardware yet, but they call it Explorer, and I just got an email about it. I got to go look at it. But I think over the next 18 months, you're going to see even more coming out as development comes. And the one I'm waiting on is Apple. They have, there's been a lot of hype. They're going to come out with something. And I know this from just like many different fronts. The question is, number one, is it going to be manufacturing friendly? Or are they going to tether it to an iPhone? I think they probably will, which is going to really hurt them. But maybe they won't. I love Apple products and everything, but they tend to not really focus on manufacturing at all. And I wish they would, but that's the one I think everybody's kind of looking at. And I've seen also that I think Google has said that they're going to be coming out with something, but again, I don't know if it's going to have a manufacturing context.
And that's 2022, right? Time frame, if I'm not mistaken, for the
for
Apple.
Apple, they have said 20. I've heard 2022, and I've heard 2023. Okay. I do know that it's been a couple of years. They bought a lens manufacturer. They bought Med.io. They bought a lot of stuff. And as an iOS developer, when you get some of these new beta releases, you see these cryptic comments that look like they kind of allude back to, gestures and, and things like that, which, the current, the current AR libraries don't support that yet. Something's up. Tim Cook is not returning my calls, even though I am an Auburn fan. So I guess I'm gonna have to wait for the rest of the world, to find out what they're doing. Tim, if you're listening, send me an email.
Tim, if you're listening, send all of us an email. We would love to come to the mothership for a live show.
That's exactly right.
But I would agree with your assessments on there, Bob. And I would say, to be fair to Apple as a whole, kind of everything that they've developed in the last 2 or 3 years have gone much back to their, pro and prosumer roots. And I think,
Right.
with the Mac Pro a couple of years ago that came out, and then with all of the M1 chips that have come out, their own silicon, I think that may be we need to create our own silicon so that we can then go ahead and leverage that in our glasses. And I'm personally really happy that they didn't put like an A15 chip or an A16 chip in glasses, and then we all run out to buy them, and then they come out with the M1 chip, and then we are like, well, now we have to go buy these because no one wants, yes. And so I think that could be on the horizon. I would also say that to kick off this, we had Jeff Winter, and he's newly with Microsoft, and I'm excited with what Microsoft is doing. As a whole within the manufacturing space. It seems like they kind of like all of the major companies are more focused, more pushing, and they realize that manufacturing could be a good, opportunity for them to increase business. So I think that there is lots of hope that the tech leaders of, the last 2 decades are paying more attention to what we're doing. And I think, Vlad, many of the people listening to this are probably putting themselves in a good position to embrace some of this new technology, even if it takes another 5 years to get onto the plant floor.
Right. And it's, I agree. And we have an AR version of IQ Agent for that, for supporting iOS devices. And it's really nice. We use the QR code for an anchor. And then you can, break out your point of interest, like your data points, and place them around the machine. It's live, you can author a point in seconds, and then everybody can see it. But I always tell people when I show them this, they say, man, that is the coolest thing. I can't wait to get this on my plant floor. And I said, okay, but wait a minute. Your hands are going to be encumbered when you use this. And they always say, well, why did you build it? And I said, I built it to be ready for glasses. Mm-hmm. Now, I built it so that I could very easily, just like I showed you the Hololens in a bar several years ago, if I can show you this on an iPad and you have this great AR scene that I can create in mere moments, and it can be shared, and yet people see how easy that is to do, then it's very easy to imagine seeing that on glasses. And so, the hands-free aspect for AR is where the promise is, in my opinion, for manufacturing. And manufacturing is the perfect place for augmented reality. It really is, and I could probably talk for days on it. But I think Microsoft has led. I think they'll continue to lead. I think there's some things that I wish they would consider, and I wish some other companies would get in, kind of get in on it. But the HoloLens is brilliant, and I hope they continue. I share your optimism.
I really liked your answer, Bob. I wanted to follow up a little bit, and you've already mentioned some of these points, but what does the, transition from an iPad, or just, the training process in general for you look like? So let's say you're going to a new facility and you're looking to train up some, managers and probably supervisors as well as operators on how to use your system, or let's say augmented reality in general. And let's say the facility has bought everybody a HoloLens, so they've all got these goggles. Obviously, you can show them on an iPad, but what is the transition? And I guess the feedback or the first impressions that you get, is it complicated for people? Is it very easy? How is the navigation, I guess, when you want to, again, if you're looking at a pump and you want to pull up some of these documents, how does it look to them on, the HoloLens versus the iPad? What are the comments that you're hearing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vlad. And on On the iPad and iPhone, it's really easy because, with the assumption that it's just like the SCADA, you get engineers to build the SCADA and then the operators just use it. So if the SCADA engineer did a pretty good job of setting up the menus, then it's easy to use. With IQ Agent, it's actually easier with these devices because you just say, okay, walk up to the equipment of your choice, launch the app, point it at the equipment, and you're going to see stuff. And so that is, within a moment or two, they get it. With the RealWear headset, it's the same. You just have to say, go into scan mode, look at the QR, and then boom, the information goes there. Now, there's a little bit more training wise with that headset, simply because it's hands free, you have to use your voice to navigate rather than your fingers. And so, that is a little bit, I have to say that RealWear's done a pretty bang up job with their voice recognition. And it's pretty good. When you're entering data, you can use phonetics, or you can use, free speech and things like that. It works in noisy environments. So there's a little bit more training involved, with that, to navigate with your voice. And so usually when I'm training people on it, the whole thing about RealWear is if you have a button that says scan, and you instinctively know that if you could tap that button, it would bring up a scan window. But with RealWear, instead of tapping it, you just say scan, and then it will translate that into that command, and then you can do it. Now with HoloLens, it's very similar, but you can use QR codes with HoloLens, and what you have to do is you use a voice command, scan code, it'll find the code. But with mixed reality, or with real augmented reality, then you have to have what you call a scene. And from a user perspective that is just viewing the information, we're going to assume the scene is created. And then they just have to know how to pull up the scene. So you can pull it up with a menu. And like with HoloLens, you've got voice commands, show menu, and then you navigate. You can say the words, and then it comes to the POI, and you can pull it up. But with the HoloLens, if you've got your scene created, you've got this big floating point of interest, and then you can just place your cursor on that, and basically use a voice command to open up the point of interest. And then you've got a pointer, and you have to just kind of move your head and go, get the pointer, and then you can use the tapper or something like that. So they kind of had a merged system where you're using both your gaze, a little dot, and then you've got your gesture. So you've got gestures to open up a POI, tap a button, close a POI. And then you've got your pointer where you just put it on the control and use your clicker or say something. So there's a little bit more training there, for our system in order to use it. But I will tell you that, Dave's story at the first of the show, they all learned to interact with it, very quickly under the influence of some alcohol, maybe one or two drinks. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. With the other, what I call the custom systems, that you find out there on the others, there's varying degrees of difficulty, but I think by and large, augmented reality, if it's designed well, is not really that hard to use. It's just learning, with goggles, you're not going to be using a keyboard. You're not going to be using your hands. If you are, then they did not design it that well. That gestures are kind of where we need to go. So does that answer kind of what you're looking for?
No, absolutely. I'm very excited to see some of these in real life. Dave has certainly a lot more experience in these applications than I do, but it paints a really good picture. I really appreciate it, Bob.
Oh, and cool. To add what Bob was saying, Bob has let me play on his HoloLens a little bit. I have a set of RealWear goggles that I've used for some customization of systems, and I've done some work on, iPads in the past. And I would say to Bob's point that if the systems are designed well, they should all be exceptionally intuitive. A lot of it is, are you a touch person or are you a voice command people? I know some people who are exceptionally good at navigating within RealWare. I am absolutely not one of those people. It takes me like an hour. It takes me an hour every time I go to start working on it to remember all of the commands. But I think once you are regularly working on it, if you can get over kind of that relatively small screen, that relatively small, hands-free tablet, then it works very well straightforward. I would also like to say that I haven't used any, but I've seen some concepts of some like wrist-mounted tablets. I mean, I think they're generally Android, but I imagine you could probably put like one of the new iPad minis on there. And for me, if I was looking to design a system, I would look really hard at those because I think it gives you the flexibility of going ahead and touching and typing as you would normally, while it also gives you the ability to use the voice and everything else. So I think the wrist-mounted tablets for me are some of the most exciting opportunities to get started, even if I've never seen one in use. And so I'm very excited to continue this conversation, Bob. But first, we have to thank our sponsors, which means I have to ask Vlad for his awkward laugh so I can do the ad read.
Okay.
You'd think at some point he'd actually make he'd make an ad read noise, but he hasn't yet. Yeah, that's what he keeps saying. But no. So again, we'd like to thank Siemens for sponsoring this theme and continuing to support us at Manufacturing Hub. And with that, we're talking about another 2022 event. So Siemens and Electromatic are inviting all of us to join more than 3,500 manufacturing executives, engineers, and enthusiasts at Manufacturing in America 2022 inside Ford Field in downtown Detroit, Michigan. That's on March 23rd and 24th. And as I said last week, don't worry, Ford Field is domed. They're not insane like the people in upstate New York who want to build a new stadium without a dome. But there we're going to learn about the newest technologies, share best practices and ideas, and be part of advancing the future of manufacturing. So this is an in-person event, and they're calling it #MIA22. It's free to attend. But registration is required to take part in the Thought Leadership Summit. Over 100 seminars and over 50 exhibits focused on digitalization, automation, controls, and drive technologies. With that, I know Vlad and I and a few other people are working on figuring out how exactly we can get there, and we're hopeful to be able to do more of this style show there and pull in a bunch of information from everyone else. So we will go ahead and drop the link to that. We'll go ahead and drop the link to that in the comments below. Again, thank you to Siemens, and we hope to see at least a couple of you out there. Yes, we hope to see at least a couple of you out there in Detroit next year. Boom. So I like this. I think that I want to touch on a couple of struggles, right? So anyone looking to implement emerging technologies are going to find struggles. And I know Bob and I have like the third hour of our conversation last week, we were sharing some like war struggles, right? Because while this is like one of the best technologies that you could implement in theory tomorrow, it's not for everyone, right? Like, and I know, so Bob, do you want to share a couple of the struggles that you have found, either like the type of organization or like the physical hardware? Like if you don't have Wi-Fi across the plant, this is not a good solution for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in 10 years, I've seen and heard quite a bit. Not having wireless is a no-go. Usually when I'm talking to customers, I'll ask, hey, are you using mobile devices on the plant floor? Do you want to, do you have wireless? Do you have good coverage and things like that? You don't have to have complete coverage, but do you have good coverage? And that's kind of one of them. The first struggle that I encountered with my very first customer is it took 6 months to get IT to let iPads on their plant network. iPads were brand new. They had just bought a whole bunch of them, but IT, didn't want to do it. And so the person that I worked with kind of set up something, on his own in a lab to allow people to come in and see it. and his strategy was to get production and engineering and maintenance and the executive suite on board for this so hard that they would gang up on IT and make them push it through. And it still took 6 months, but they did that. And of course, IT, it's their job to be the wardens. They have to be like that. Security, for manufacturing plants, is pretty big, and so they have to, take that stance. Somebody's got to take that stance, and so they get kind of a hard rap there. So having that wireless coverage and things like that. Now, we do have like our forms capability and workflow capability. They do work offline.
Mm-hmm.
We do have an IQ agent offline, for field service or areas of the plant. But another struggle is just kind of what we touched on earlier, where, well, I've got all this work that I got to do to get prepared, and it's usually around organizing their documents and organizing their stuff. But the thing is, you're never, ever going to grow. You're never going to be able to take advantage of digitalization if you don't have these resources organized. And, there's been a lot of studies how much a single piece of paper costs manufacturing plants in a year. And it could be a schematic that people have to check out, or it could be, if you think about a paper form, and you got people running around the plants filling out a paper form, and somebody, one person doesn't write that well, and so it's going to waste time trying to figure out what this person was trying to say, or they make a mistake, or they don't fill something out, which that happens all the time. So if you have an electronic form, then you can really mitigate those risks. They're typing, or they're using text input or speech input, or they're selecting from drop downs. You don't have a problem reading that, and you can force them to fill everything out. With our forms, I can embed a video, because another thing is, they go to the form, they don't know how to do that step. You can embed a video in that step. Hey, watch the video, it's going to show you how to do it. So you can actually have people at a lower experience level performing at a higher level, because we're using electronic resources and we're using forms, or you're giving them, instead of going to look for a document. One of the big use cases for our first customer was they were FDA regulated. And once they started using IQ Agent, they never took a hit for the wrong version of a manual being on a workstation, because usually they'd have one stuffed in a drawer. Well, guess what? FDA is going to find that. If it's anywhere, they're going to find it. And so, convincing companies that you need to spend this time. And usually the approach that I take is, you don't have to eat the entire elephant at once. Take your 10 most requested, most important documents, and we can do those in an hour. And then let's get the iPads out there. Let's get those 10 things out there. Let's get those 10 operators using it. Let them be the evangelist. Hey, that was great. I just scanned it, pulled up the document, filled out a form. I was done. They talk about it in the lunchroom, or, whatever. Next thing you know, other people want to use it. And then you do the next 10 most critical, and the next 10 most critical. So you don't have to do it all right now. Just, do the 10% that is going to make the most impact. And another barrier, and this is the big one, is with augmented reality, and you've got something on your face, and you're in, and you're in a plant. One of the biggest things is, if you get distracted by something, or you've got this headset on and your peripheral vision, there's been AR and VR, AR headsets out there that block your peripheral vision. You can't do that on a plant floor. You can't see the forklift coming. That's another thing that they really have to pay attention to. But there's the safety factor, and it's very real. And that's something that's got to be mitigated. So, I think the first couple where you've just got to do the work, and you've got to have your documentation organized and stuff like that. That's work that you have to do, and it's going to pay off in orders of magnitude once you get it done, and you don't have to do it all at once. And we can help you do it. There's a lot of integrators who'd be happy to help you do it. But you just kind of have to get past that. There is an initial cost depending on the platform that you buy. and you can start low and kind of go high. But those are really some of the pushback that I've had. That's probably 90% of the pushback is those things right there. And we've done a pretty good job of mitigating it, but sometimes you just kind of got to let it sit and let them kind of gel and marinate in the technology and let them see what other people are doing, and they start to come around.
So
go ahead, Dave. I did have a comment, but I'll go after you.
So that's fine. So I love Bob's kind of comment about documentation, and as he was telling that story, I worked with 2 or 3 companies this spring, and the result of that initial work was basically hey, we don't have this process, we don't have this, we don't have a lot of this, and the answers from them ironically were like, we don't have enough time to do this, right? Like, we've got these other things that we're planning to do. And so you go check in with them later, and now they're absolutely slammed. Everyone is working 10 or 11-hour shifts and no one gets any breaks. And the best case scenario for them would have been to do the work that they should have done 2 or 3 months ago, as opposed to waiting to hold off because they thought that they were busy at the moment. And so putting documentation together or getting those processes and procedures in place, well, it takes a little bit of time. And while the easy answer might just be to pay someone to help you do it, or pay some extra staff to come in to go through and put that together, I have never once seen it not pay off in the long run.
Right.
Because something will happen. Right. Yes. Something will happen. And it's like, oh, I really wish I did this 3 weeks ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, when Bob told me I needed to do this the first time. But yet we're in this scenario and in this situation. Vlad, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to draw on exactly the same, I guess, point from a maintenance standpoint. I just think in many situations, it just might be difficult to quantify, the time lost by your technicians trying to find the right documentation when they need it during a night shift, right? And losing you, let's say, 1 hour worth of downtime instead of 10 minutes because the manual was readily available, right? And so I think that's where maybe this like illusion lies, where we don't have the time, but in reality, you're just paying with the downtime, or let's say the mistakes that happen as a result of not having those procedures in place. But I also wanted to say, I guess, on the last point of, the hardware deficiencies, it's interesting to hear that, because maybe it is coming from, like, let's say the gaming world, where those headsets don't need to take care of those blind spots. But you would think that in industrial applications, if anything, they could release something with a metaphorical, I guess, rear view mirror, right? Like a camera mounted on the back of your head, so you would be more aware of some of these forklifts or whatever else you have in terms of like safety. So maybe there will be some developments, right? As you said, I think there's many more manufacturers stepping in. So maybe there's going to be augmented reality for industrial specifically that will address some of those safety concerns and even make it even better.
Yeah, it's something that is being worked on. There's a group called Area, which I used to be a part of, that they have worked on, those kinds of things, and really their focus is on standards and saying, okay, if there are standards on safety, on how you do augmented reality and various things, then you're going to get your adoption, because they are they are trying to drive adoption for augmented reality in manufacturing. And to Dave's point, one of the things that we used to say is, when you're trying to quantify, we did surveys, and companies were saying that it was typically 30 minutes lost per person per day. So if you've got 15 workers using documents and they, and you're paying an average of, about $30 an hour, for, maintenance and engineers and stuff like that, that's $100,000 a year. You can quantify that, and you can also quantify, like I was talking about, the workflow and forms, which are very well suited to augmented reality, where if they are always completely filling out the report because you don't give them a chance, and you never have problems reading the results, and and then they're shown how to do the step, because it's AR, we can use video, then it's going to be 3 times that. The whole point is augmented reality puts information, directly in context to the real world. And so it's automatically intuitive. And the ROI for plants going forward is just going to be absolutely huge, if we can just get this out there. But it's, there's a lot of pushback on, I don't want to go, tackle this mountain of paperwork. You don't have time to not tackle that mountain of paperwork. You're always going to lose. And it's just, and this brings me to the point that I really wanted to make, is sometimes a problem has been a problem for so long that it's not recognized as a problem. It just takes an hour to go get my schematics. That's what it is. Mm-hmm. You don't have to live with that problem. And that's the thing that I try to get people to see. You have to recognize that as a problem that can be solved and solve it. That's like, that's the message that I take to these companies.
So I love that, Bob. I think that's a really good message. And I want to kind of finish the augmented reality set portion of this on a higher note than maybe talking about some problems. So as we're talking about emerging technologies, right, we're talking about into the future. I think at least you and I, and probably Vlad, agree that we're going to see more of this on the plant floor. As to if it takes 2 years or 20 years to get to mass adoption, I don't know. But as we're looking forward, do you envision that the augmented reality is going to help push more wireless and more kind of those style of communications and devices onto the plant floor? Do you think it's going to be a bottom push up of, hey, we have to have this, so let's build the infrastructure around it? Or do you think we're going to build the infrastructure around it, and then as soon as we have, good wireless across the plant floor, we're immediately going to start implementing this technology?
Yeah, that's really a great question. And I think if you look at what 5G is going to bring, that is a technology that is an enabling technology, just like 4G, just like cellular, just like mobile devices, just like, wireless networks. I've seen all of those, come to pass. And I think it's probably going to be both. I saw the adoption, back in the day, when I first started with Siemens back in the early 90s, it was like, well, we're not going to have Windows on the plant floor. We're going to stick with our, AIX, Unix, and Linux. And then Windows 95 actually, had some good stuff. Wonderware was on it, and they go, okay, we could do Windows, but it's going to be, Windows NT, and we're not going to use it that much. But we're not going to allow wireless because walking around with technology is just too dangerous, and it's not to be trusted. And then it was, well, okay, but not wireless, because now they're not tethered, and who knows what they're going to do. All right. Uh-huh. And then it was, okay, not this and not this. And here's a quick story. And, I was in one of the larger automotive companies. And when I first demoed this software back in the day, I was in front of one of the VPs of manufacturing. And I was set up, in a lab, and they brought him in. He was a really cool guy. I was very nervous, very excited, and I showed him the technology with an iPhone and with an iPad. And he, hooked up his iPhone. He thought it was really cool, and I thought everything was really going great, And then, after about an hour, I asked him, okay, well, what do you think? And he goes, "Wow, this is great technology. I love absolutely what you're doing. We will never use this on our plant floor." And I said, okay, why? And he said, well, if you go on our plant, there's this giant sign that says there will be no cameras or recording devices on the production floor. I said, I've seen that sign. And I said, I have to tell you that every worker out there has got an iPhone or an Android phone in their pocket. And I know that they use them. And he said, you're right. And I said, so is it that you ignore that rule or what? Because the sign is still there. And these guys actually adopted their policy for my application. And they went from you can't have it at all or you can't pull it out to there are certain circumstances where you can use this. And, and mobile device management allows you to, remotely really enforce that. because you can enforce, okay, I'll turn your camera off if you walk into this room where we're having very sensitive things going on. Or if you're walking around, I'm just going to turn off your camera because I want you paying attention to your surroundings. So I think the adoption for AR, if you use the litmus test, and I have a saying, and not everybody likes this saying, but my saying is, don't let technology get in the way of a darn good solution. People beat on me, oh, you're using QR codes. That's, old technology. You should use object recognition. Trust me, I've looked at every technology to tell me exactly where I'm at and which piece of technology. I looked at dead reckoning. I looked at wireless. The fastest way to get kicked out of a plant is to tell them you want to put code on their wireless routers. I mean, you teleport to the parking lot. You don't even say goodbye. And so, I've looked at the technology, and that's the best technology to use. It's not the coolest technology, all right, but it's the best technology until there's better. I mean, and there's a lot of kind of ways to do it, but none of them, is as fail-safe as that. And so I think that if we are creating augmented reality applications that provide real value, that appeal and solve real problems, and at a cost point that allows people to digitize, and our price point is below $10,000, to get, and you get a full digitalization package that can get you right there where you need to be. Then I think from the ground up, you're going to get some, because this makes it accessible to your smaller manufacturing plants. It doesn't have to be a big chem farm or automotive or whatever. It can be a smaller plant. And I got a bakery in Canada that uses the daylights. I got a 20 client license up there. They got it on all their ovens, on their distribution. They absolutely love it. I do also think that because of the infrastructure coming in that people, are seeing, the other technologies, it's going to have kind of this, big effect where, 5G is coming, and we have, this cloud technology we want to use, and we have, this technology we want to use. And in order to get ready for this, one of the things we have to do is organize our documents, and we have to use these mobile devices to take advantage of these different technologies. And then once you do this, just like a plant says, hey, mobile devices, I see benefit in that. Well, once they have mobile devices, that enables them to use augmented reality and use some of these others. And once they're using AR, then it's a smaller leap to wearable AR, because the biggest problem is if you go into a plant and they're not even using digital, they're not using mobile, platforms, you're not going to get them to stick a set of goggles on their head. That's way too much. And so I think a lot of the technology coming down the pipe is what I call, enabling technology. It's there. It allows the plant to embrace this. So the short answer to your question, I think it's going to be both. I think it's going to be from the ground up, and that they're going to adopt the technology because it solves some problems, but also some of these other infrastructures and other applications coming in like 5G and cloud and things like that is going to make the step into AR a lot easier to do.
I love it,
Dave,
Bob. I was going to say we have to get to the rapid fire questions, but I feel like Vlad has like 1,000 more questions. So let's let Vlad ask one last question, and then we'll jump into the rapid fire questions, and we'll wrap it up for everyone.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Bob, I want to ask about the next features that you see that would make augmented reality even better than what it currently is. Is there anything that you're looking forward to? Anything, again, maybe not necessarily very applicable, but awesome and just like really exciting and kind of something that you're looking forward to? Again, could be on the hardware side, could be on the software side. What are your thoughts on what's in the years to come?
Well, there's a lot there. And I think really the first thing is we've got to have a wearable that is comfortable, that is safety compliant, that someone can use, that's going to meet, whatever requirements that manufacturing is going to throw at it. And I think we're getting there. I have high hopes, for what Apple is going to be doing. And even, if they are tethered and if they're not accepted on the plant floor, they're going to show people on the plant floor what is possible. And there are a lot of manufacturers that are going for that. And you're not going to have that, like the HoloLens one, was cool. It was bulky, but you're not going to start with the end product. That was a transitory product. HoloLens 2 is a transitory product. Who knows what HoloLens 3 is going to be? So I think the first advancement is going to be a true AR capable wearable. And I think, you're going to start to see standards. There are standards coming out for AR, and that's going to help the adoption. And this is kind of going on out there, Vlad. I'm going to warn you, but that is also transitory. The next thing is going to be, I don't need a wearable to see it. And, Elon Musk, who also doesn't return my calls, is working on something called a neural lace that gives us, a mind to computer interface. And this is not going to happen in the next couple of years. I mean, we already have technology that allows people to move a cursor with their mind. And they've got monkeys and they've got rats and stuff, doing this. And they actually have these encephalographs you can put on your head, and you have to train. Basically, what you're doing is you're training the helmet so that when you think a certain thing, it can recognize that, and then it can execute a command. And I did there's actually a software development kit, that allows you to do that rudimentarily. But as this, I think 30 years from now, maybe even 20 years from now, you're going to have Neuralink interfaces that allow you to, be able to interface with technology directly. I definitely think it's coming. I think that, the fact that Facebook now is Meta, and they're talking about, virtual landscapes and being able to interact, glasses and goggles and tablets are just, these are tools. We're still used to using tools, but we're going to get away, humanity is going to get away from that. And so I think the brain interface, the non-invasive brain interface is going to really revolutionize this. And I read a lot of science fiction. I've got some references, but this is, I really feel like that's where it's going. As far as from the software, the glasses, the true augmented reality glasses that is going to across the board be the Apple iPhone of wearable technology. It's going to give you technology like wayfinding. Okay, so I'm in a plant and I've got an alarm, and I'm not, and I'm kind of new. Well, wayfinding can basically lead me with breadcrumbs through this plant to the problem. All right, so we've talked about augmented reality allowing people with a lower experience level performing at a higher level because they have in context information that allows them to not worry about going to get the information and instead focusing on fixing the problem. Things like waypoint finding, which there's HoloLens development that's been done on that. We can drop breadcrumbs. We can lead people directly to where they need to be, or for meetings and things like that. But it all, it all is very dependent on having the first true wearable AR platform. And then once we have that and we have the standards in place, we overcome these safety barriers, and we overcome, the other barriers of, getting things organized. That's when the singularity is going to happen with augmented reality on the plant floor.
No, absolutely. And I really appreciate that perspective. I mean, I completely agree. And I think a lot of that will also translate to outside of manufacturing, right? Because again, there's many applications in our daily life that could be augmented. Again, something as simple like you mentioned, you have a meeting, for example, and instead of checking your phone, well, it's in room 202 in a unknown facility. So then you have to look at the map, to find out where it's at. Well, it could kind of lead you to where that is because it knows the plan of the building and what the navigation is. But no, I mean, there's tons of real life applications. It's just like the first one that came to mind, but no, really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, well, I just want to add, if I can add very quickly to that, it's like in the plan, I've made comments to customers that augmented reality will be able to replace physical panels, physical HMI devices, but in the real world, it could replace signs. It could replace, there's so much of hard things that don't need to be there. Think of being in a building that doesn't have any of these, but if you're augmented, these could be there. They could be changed at any time. It requires no building. The implications are profound. For what it could do.
I think the future is absolutely exciting, Bob, and I hope everyone, I hope everyone listening is as excited as we are, because we're going to continue to be part of it. And like you alluded to it a bit in your last comment, but this is the point in time where I like to joke. This is our hashtag not sponsored Audible segment, in which I ask you for some book recommendations, and you go ahead or Vlad goes ahead and downloads them immediately. But you have a couple. You have a couple of very interesting futuristic book recommendations. Can you tell everyone what you would recommend?
I really can, and I just I'm an absolute fanboy of this kind of fiction. But the first one, going back, I guess my first best one is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. You cannot watch the movie and appreciate that book. You've got to read the book, especially for those who grew up in the 80s. And basically, it is about, this virtual world called the Oasis. And the world's kind of gone to complete crap and global warming and things like that, and everybody's in poverty. But the developer of this, a guy named James Halliday, invented the Oasis, and it only cost $0.25 to join. And you had, this haptic gloves and goggles, and it was completely immersive. You couldn't even really tell it from the real world. And people went to school in it and things like this. But the whole point of the book is there's a hidden, after he dies, it triggers a video to everyone, and there's this Easter egg that if you find the Easter egg, then you become the inheritor of the company Oasis, and you get to run the Oasis. And it's a fantastic book. There's another one that is prophetic by Neil Stephenson called Snow Crash, and that was done, I think, back in the late '90s, and before all of this happened. But it's about the same type of world where you have a virtual world and people have avatars, and you can buy real estate and you do business there. And the whole idea is that someone invents a virus that people, because they're using a brain interface, if they get this virus, it actually affects them physically. And it's a very entertaining book and a very good one. And the last one is kind of the opposite of this, where it's called Damon by Daniel Suarez. And this was when the internet was new, but it was basically, the concept is the death of, this game programmer triggered a takeover of the internet, and he sought to change the entire world order by gamifying real life and bringing down companies and bringing down corporations and bringing down countries, but allowing people to be able to survive and thrive on their own governance. And it is a fascinating book. And so I can't recommend those enough, because I think they're enjoyable, but they are also prophetic, because I think they can kind of open your mind to where technology can go, both the good and the bad, and give you kind of an eye-opening and mind-opening experience of how technology can be used. So those are my recommendations.
No, very exciting. I think it'll give everyone many things to think about over the assumed holiday break coming up. Thank you, Bob. So next is, who should reach out to you?
As far as you mean from a standpoint of people that want to use my product, basically what we can do is help you digitize your plant floor. And what we try, my 60-second elevator pitch is, we make information relevant to what you're doing show up instantly on your mobile device or your wearable device. And so you point your device at a piece of equipment. And, we do a lot more than that, but that's kind of our core thing. So companies that have a lot of automation, companies that have a lot of documentation, companies that need to take their paper forms and go and get these in electronic format, we provide a very cost-effective application that will allow you to do this base level digitization. It installs in 10 minutes. It's an on-prem thing. So if you've got a lot of automation, if you've got your documentation, if you want to dip your toe in augmented reality and try out these new devices, it is a very low risk pilot, because we can kind of work across these devices. Those that should not, on the other hand, if you haven't yet, if you don't have a wireless, or if you're a non-automated process, you don't have a lot of documentation, things like that, then we might not be as helpful yet. But hopefully that gives some listeners some direction on that.
Absolutely. No, I think you've absolutely given many people things to think about. So last question for you, Bob, is do you have some career advice for folks in automation or in manufacturing?
Yeah, I do. And, there's a lot of great advice that I see out there, hire smart people and things like that. And, what I'm going to say is not earth shattering, but I think personal happiness in this life is of utmost importance. And, I see a lot of people that go into professions because they make a lot of money and not because they love them. And you end up with a lot of semi-rich, very unhappy people. And I've met quite a few, like that. And, my best friend's wife was a lawyer. She was a very good lawyer. She's a fellow veteran. But she got into law and she decided that she didn't like it. And so now she's a school teacher. Now she's making a third as much, but she's 50 times as happy and she's very good at it. And I think that was a very, very brave thing she did, because she walked away from a very big degree and from a partnership deal where she could be making, lots and lots of money. But it was more important to her to be happy. And I think, she has been a very big inspiration to me. So my advice is, find what makes you happy. Obviously, you've got, like if, I like to brew beer, I like to, automation and writing code appeals to me, and technology appeals to me. I'm not going to say every single thing I do at work makes me happy, but most of the things that I do at work make me happy. And so if you're happy, you're going to be good at it. And if you're good at it, you're going to make money and you're going to, enjoy that. And I've told my kids that. I think they're both going into professions that they're very good at and they seem to enjoy. And so that's really the best advice that I can give.
No, that I think that's fantastic advice, and probably something many of us need to hear on a more regular basis than we do. But no, thank you very much, Bob. And thank you, everyone. This has been episode 41 of the Manufacturing Hub with me, Dave, and this guy over here, Vlad. If you have not already, please go ahead and subscribe to all of our channels and rate us 5 stars on your podcasts and do all those things, because apparently it matters, and we've done enough of these that we need to start asking you guys to go ahead and do that. Again, we've got a giveaway going if you're listening in December of 2022 on the Manufacturing Hub webpage. You guys can go ahead there, check all of that out and catch all the updates. Next week, if you're watching us live on the 27th, Vlad and I are going to do some sort of mega stream, and we'll see you guys there. Until next week, we'll see you guys all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thanks,
everyone. It's been a blast. Thank you, Vlad. Thank you, Dave. We'll see you soon.